Welcome to a very special catalogue here at Art+Object. This is a catalogue that Ben has worked on very, very hard. It's a wonderful collection. It is, of course, the collection of Dame Judith Binney and Sebastian Black. We're going to take you through some of the works that we think are really unique and a little bit about the history of this collection. All of the works are, of course, on view here at Art+Object for the next couple of days, and we go to auction this coming Thursday at 6:30. The catalogue is, of course, illustrated online. We urge you to take the opportunity to come down and see one of the most special and interesting catalogues we've ever offered here at Art+Object.
I think last time I stood in front of you, we were talking about the Ron Sang collection. And although we've got two collections perhaps similarly focused on works of art, principally from the 1970s, you couldn't really have two more different collections. And certainly the houses that encase these collections couldn't be more different. The residence where Judith Binney and Sebastian Black lived was a very traditional Mount Eden Auckland villa. The collection pretty much fills our entire showroom, and looking back here I sort of find myself struggling to work out just how they contained it all and contained it all so well. Perhaps one way is through the fact that rather than, as in the Ron Sang collection, where there are a lot of works at scale, in the Binney and Black residence there's probably more of a focus on smaller works. These are three of my favourite paintings from the collection. They work just beautifully together, really. We have, of course, the two works by Colin McCann here. The work down the bottom is a panoramic work from about 1967 from his North Otago series. It has all the classic elements of that body of work. It is verdant green, panoramic hill line work where the landscape is stripped back to its bare bones, really. This is absolutely beautiful little Walters canvas. It's an untitled work, among the most simple but elegant Walters Koru compositions you would find. Your eye starts at the top of the canvas and works its way down through the field at the top, down through the layers of black, into the four Koru bands at the bottom. Very, very, very gentle painting, very enjoyable. And then on the left, this absolutely superb gem of a small McCann from his waterfall series, of course, of 1964. What's particularly special about this is rather than the waterfall form coming in from the left or the right, it comes in through a central flow. And in doing so, you get those elements of the waterfall flashing at the bottom there. But I think what's nicest about this, and what revealed itself to me after a little bit of time, was these two flat forms here. The way they almost recall the Muruwai Island series with the two landforms across the water, almost mirroring each other. So three small but very beautiful little works.
This is a wonderful work to see in the collection. This is Brent Wong's Capitulation of 1970, because it really goes to the heart, I think, of some of the couple's beliefs, certainly Sebastian Black's. I was at Auckland University in the 1980s, and I was one of, I think, a couple of generations of student to whom Sebastian Black would have been a memorable figure in the lecture rooms. And I recall him speaking very clearly about the dystopian novel in English literature. Of course, we think of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, George Orwell's 1984, and of course the great precedent to all of those being H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. And certainly what we see in this particular painting is a sense of a clash of cultures, of the past, the abandoned past, and the future, an indeterminate future, rising up there in the background in the form of these unique architectural monoliths that are so special and so characterise the work of Brent Wong. This is an incredible example of his work. The painterly precision really has to be seen to be believed, and I think for all New Zealand art fans who grew up in the 1970s and saw Brent Wong's work for the first time, they really leave an indelible mark in the visual culture of New Zealand.
One of the artists whose work features most prominently in the collection of Dame Judith Binney and Sebastian Black is that of their very close friend, Greer Twiss. Greer is well known to many New Zealanders by the public work that he has made, which is situated in two prominent locations within Auckland. He has for over 15 years been making work and exhibiting it in New Zealand and elsewhere. Within this collection there are a broad spectrum of wonderful works by Greer. The sculpture behind me is a very typical example. Edible Histories features a variety of native birds perched on poles, and it's got a musical component which is quite wonderful to come and have a listen to. There are other examples within the collection. The restoration of Victory, a very interesting figure sculpture within a beautiful case, and a small albatross marquette, which feels very much like a study for the large sculpture in downtown Auckland. Another beautiful work within the collection, which is interesting when you think about Greer's history. He had an early interest in puppetry. It's It's a beautiful lead wall-mounted piece featuring an inscription of a poem by Bill Manhire.
If ever there was a collection of works which was so much more than the sum of the parts, it just has to be this collection. Almost every work has a story and is surrounded by the intimate relationship between the owners of the work and the artists. And I think case in point has to be these two magnificent banners by Ralph Hotere. These two unusual works, and I say unusual solely really because of the palette choice. David Eggleton in the Black Light catalogue and Ralph Hotere coined a wonderful description when he said, everything Hotere touches turns to black. But here we have two paintings as far removed from that statement as you could get. There's wonderful tones that come through in both. The one on the right, Binney and Sebastian painting, where you've got this lovely touch of orange across this intriguing shape here on the right, through to this one here, which is punctuated with the rich turquoise, so redolent of the Mediterranean and the Ballarat Islands, where of course they were done, through to shimmering undercurrent, which comes through this blaze of white and recalls a light fractured off the water. Both works are complex, riddled with inscriptions from the artist to his good friend Sebastian Black, and also with inscriptions that relate to where they were done, when they were done. In short, in 1978, Ralph Hotere travelled to Europe with his wife Priscilla McQueen and their daughter. They stayed at Sebastian's invitation in the Black residence on the island of Menorca near Binney and Sebastian. Hotere, being the marvellously generous character that he was, left the painting there at the residence and returned one back to Sebastian by way of a gift. They've stayed together ever since. They're definitely two individual works, slightly different formats, but obviously there's a lot of commonalities going on. You'll notice that these share similarities with the song cycle banners, not just insofar as their verticality, not just insofar as they're both on loose canvas, but also in the way there's areas where there's different textures, different media, and that's because, as Peter Simpson does such a good job of explaining in the catalogue, in a mundane sense, when Hotere painted them, he simply pinned them to a table that was on the porch in Menorca, and this is where he pinned them, and this area used to hang over the edge of the table. And you can see on this one there, Hotere really has made the most and completely changed the direction of their mundane coming into being through painting around these pinholes with these lovely shots in blue. There's another wonderful quote and a wonderful interview in the catalogue between Mary Kisler and Sebastian Black. And they talk about these fish symbols, and Sebastian Black quite laughingly draws attention to what the arts community was saying about them at the time about Hotere returning to Christian symbols in the works. Sebastian Black notes that in fact the fish were a sign leading Hotere to where the house was in Menorca. So as always with Hotere, there's the mundane and the wonderfully transcendent together in the same work.
I think one of the really interesting stories of New Zealand art in the 1970s is a change of focus, a change of influence, if you like. I think it's fair to say that New Zealand art, when it was available for external influences, those were predominantly continental Europe or, of course, the British tradition in the mid part of the 20th century. But in the late 1960s and the early 1970s, we begin to see the impact of American abstraction being felt within New Zealand art. And none clearer, I think, than in the work of Gretchen Albrecht at this period. This is C Screen number 1 from 1976. And of course, what we see here is a wonderful amalgam of Albrecht's response to the New Zealand environment, at the same time being very aware of trends within American colour field painting of the 1960s. A lot of names come to mind when we look at this work. Helen Frankenthaler, Maurice Lewis, Kenneth Noland, of course. But I think one of the things that makes this really uniquely and recognisable as a Gretchen Albrecht work is her extraordinarily finely calibrated sense of colour. And it's colour that we interpret as being fundamentally of this land, of New Zealand.